You ever get evicted from land you secretly own? The smell of damp wood and lake water hit me the second I stepped out of my truck. Morning fog hung low over the surface like something alive. My boots crunched over gravel as I walked toward my cabin. Then I saw it. A bright orange paper flapping against my front door. Eviction notice. Freshly taped. Still curling at the edges from the humidity. I didn't touch it right away. I just stood there and listened. Somewhere across the water, a boat engine hummed low in the distance. Calm. Steady. Like nothing was wrong. Behind me, tires rolled slowly over dirt. I didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Rebecca Sloan stepped out of her SUV like she owned the air itself. White blazer. Oversized sunglasses. A smile sharp enough to cut glass. "You've got 72 hours," she said. Her voice carried across the lake like she had rehearsed it. I peeled the notice off the door slowly. The paper made that dry tearing sound that always sticks with you. 72 hours for what? I asked. She gave a small laugh. Not loud. Just enough. For people like you to move on. She gestured toward the water. You've been dragging this place down for years. That boat. That noise. That smell. I glanced back at the lake. My boat sat exactly where it always had. Quiet. Tide clean. Nothing out of place. It's a lake, I said. It smells like one. Her smile didn't move. Not even a little. Behind her, a few HOA members stood watching. Arms crossed. Phones out. Waiting for a scene. Waiting for me to argue. I didn't give them one. I folded the paper once. Then again. Slipped it into my jacket. Rebecca tilted her head, like she expected more. That's it? She asked. No fight? I shook my head. Not today. The wind shifted and carried the faint scent of fuel from the marina down the shore. I could see the parking lot from where I stood. Packed tighter than usual. Weekend traffic already building. She followed my gaze for a second, then shrugged like it meant nothing. To her, it was just a parking lot. Just another asset her HOA controlled. That's what she believed. I stepped past her without another word and unlocked my door. The hinges creaked the same way they always had. Inside, everything was exactly where I left it. Old wood table. Coffee mug still half full. Papers stacked neatly by the window. I set my keys down and looked out across the water. Calm. Still. Quiet. You wouldn't know from looking at it that every house behind me depended on that lake. Or that every car parked out there was sitting on land tied to my name. Rebecca thought she was removing a problem. Cleaning up her neighborhood. She thought this was about a boat. About a smell. About appearances. What she didn't know was simple. She hadn't just tried to evict me. She had just pulled the first thread on something that held her entire world together. The cabin stayed quiet after she left, but the silence was not peaceful anymore. It felt calculated. Like the kind of quiet that comes before something expensive breaks. I sat at the table and unfolded the notice again. Official letterhead. Legal language. Signatures from people who had never stepped foot on this side of the lake. It was not about noise. It was not about smell. It was about control. I reached for the stack of documents by the window. Old folders. Thick. Labeled in handwriting that hadn't changed in years. Property surveys. Utility maps. Access rights. The kind of paperwork nobody reads until everything depends on it. Outside, another car rolled past slowly. Tires crunching. Someone curious. Someone watching. Word spreads fast in places like this, especially when someone like Rebecca decides to make an example out of you. I flipped open the first folder. The paper inside was heavier. Official. Stamped. Signed long before Rebecca ever bought her house. Before the HOA even existed. I ran my finger along a line most people would ignore. Parcel designation. Water rights. Shared access easement. Words that sound boring until they start costing people money. A lot of money. My phone buzzed on the table. Unknown number. I let it ring once. Twice. Then I answered. This is Daniel Harper. Silence for half a second. Then a voice. Polished. Careful. Mr. Harper. This is the Lakeview Homeowners Association legal office. I leaned back in my chair. The wood creaked. Softly. That was fast, I said. The voice ignored that. We are calling to confirm you received the eviction notice. I looked out the window again. The parking lot across the shoreline was filling up. SUVs. Pickup trucks. Families unloading coolers. Nobody thinking twice about where they parked. Nobody thinking about who owned what. I received it, I said. Good, the voice replied. We expect compliance within the stated time frame. I let a few seconds pass. Not long. Just enough. And if I don't? Another pause. Slightly longer this time. Then we will proceed with enforcement actions as outlined. Enforcement. That word always sounds bigger than it is. Until it isn't. I closed the folder in front of me. Look, you might want to double-check your files, I said. The voice shifted. Just slightly. Our records are very clear. Are they? I asked. I could hear papers moving on their end. Keyboard clicks. Someone pulling up documents they had never actually read before. Yes, they said. Less confident now. I stood up and walked to the window. The sun was burning through the fog. Light spreading across the lake. Clear now. Open. Exposed. Then you already know, I said slowly, that the access road your entire community uses runs through parcel 14B. Silence again. Longer this time. Real silence. The kind that means someone is reading something important. And you also know, I continued, that parcel 14B is not under HOA control. A faint breath on the other end. Mr. Harper, the voice said carefully, what exactly are you implying? I smiled, but they couldn't see it. I'm not implying anything, I said. I'm reminding you. Outside, a truck pulled into the lot and parked near the edge. Right where the faded boundary markers sat half buried in gravel. Markers nobody paid attention to. Except me. I watched the driver step out, slam the door, and walk off without a second thought. I lowered my voice just a little. You gave me 72 hours, I said. That's fair. I turned away from the window and picked up my keys again. The metal felt cold. Solid. Familiar. I'll take the same, I added. The voice tried to recover. We are not negotiating timelines. I headed for the door. You're not negotiating anything, I said. Not yet. I stepped outside and locked the cabin behind me. The air felt different now. Sharper. Like everything had just shifted 1 inch to the left. Not enough for them to notice. Not yet. But enough to change what happens next. I didn't head back inside. I walked straight past my cabin and down the narrow trail that cut through the brush toward the shoreline. The ground was uneven. Roots pushed up through packed dirt. The kind of path you only notice when you've walked it 100 times. The lake opened up in front of me. Wide. Calm. Deceptively simple. Sunlight was now fully breaking through the morning haze. The water looked clean. Expensive. Like something people would pay a premium to live near. And they did. Every single house behind me existed because of that view. Because of that access. Because of that assumption. I kept walking until I reached the edge of the parking lot. Gravel spread out in a wide rectangle. Lines faded. Tire marks overlapping in every direction. Cars packed tight. Families unloading kayaks. Kids laughing. Coolers dragging across the ground. Nobody thinking about boundaries. Nobody checking property maps. Why would they? Everything here was designed to feel shared. Convenient. Permanent. I stopped at the old metal post near the corner. Rusted. Slightly bent. Easy to miss if you weren't looking for it. I brushed dirt away with my boot. The survey marker underneath caught the light. Small. Stamped. Official. I crouched down and ran my fingers over it. Still there. Still valid. Still ignored. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a name I recognized. Callahan Infrastructure Group. I answered without hesitation. Daniel, the voice said. Deep. Direct. No wasted words. They had heard. Of course they had. News like this moves faster through business circles than it ever does through neighborhoods. Then you already know what I need, I said. A short pause. Not uncertainty. Calculation. Temporary closure or full restriction? He asked. I stood up and looked across the lot again. A delivery truck had just pulled in, reversing near the center. Tires grinding gravel into dust. Start with access control, I said. Legal and visible. Another pause. That will get attention, he said. That's the point, I replied. He didn't argue. He never did when the paperwork backed it up. I'll have crews ready within 24 hours, he said. Barriers. Signage. Compliance notices. I nodded even though he couldn't see it. Make sure everything is documented, I said. Every step. Always is, he said. Then the line went dead. I slipped my phone back into my pocket and took one last look at the lot. It looked the same as it always had. Busy. Loud. Normal. But that normal depended on something fragile. Something most people never question until it disappears. I turned and walked back toward the cabin. Halfway up the trail, I heard a voice behind me. Sharp. Controlled. What exactly are you doing down there? I didn't need to turn around. Rebecca again. Closer this time. Curious now. I stopped but didn't face her. Just checking something, I said. Her heels clicked against the dirt as she stepped closer. You have 72 hours, she reminded me. You should be packing. I let out a small breath. Not frustration. Not yet. I heard you the first time, I said. She stepped around so she could see my face. Sunglasses still on. Smile still fixed. Good, she said. Because this community does not tolerate problems. I looked past her toward the houses lining the ridge. Perfect lawns. Clean driveways. Every detail controlled. Every rule enforced. Built on landlines most of them had never seen. No, I said quietly. It really doesn't. She studied me for a second, waiting for something. Anger. Resistance. Anything she could use. I gave her nothing. That unsettled her more than anything else could have. Then I suggest you cooperate, she said. I nodded once. Slow. Measured. I replied. I stepped past her again and headed back to my cabin. Behind me, I could feel her watching. Trying to understand what she was missing. Trying to figure out why I wasn't reacting the way she expected. She thought this was about removing me. Cleaning up an inconvenience. She still believed she was in control of the outcome. What she didn't see was already in motion. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just precise. The kind of move that doesn't look like anything until everything stops working at once. The next morning did not start with noise. It started with absence. I woke up before sunrise like I always did. Habit. Routine. The kind that stays with you even when everything else changes. I stepped outside with a cup of coffee in my hand and stopped halfway down the porch steps. Something was off. No engines. No doors slamming. No early boats cutting across the water. The lake was still. Too still. I walked toward the shoreline again. Same path. Same uneven ground. But the air felt different. Tighter. Like the place was holding its breath. When I reached the edge of the trees, I saw it. The parking lot was empty. Completely empty. No cars. No trucks. No trailers. Just gravel. Fresh tire tracks leading out. None leading in. At the entrance, 2 temporary steel barriers stood across the access road. Clean. Straight. Locked into place. Bright white signage bolted to each one. No access beyond this point without authorization. I took a slow sip of coffee and let it sit there for a second. The silence finally made sense. Behind me, I heard movement. Voices. Confused. A door slammed somewhere up the hill. Then another. I did not turn right away. I watched the empty lot for a few more seconds. Let the image settle. This was the first crack. Small on the surface. Massive underneath. A few minutes later, I heard her again. This time she wasn't controlled. Rebecca came down the path almost running. Sunglasses gone. Phone in her hand. "What is this?" she demanded. I turned slowly. Calm. Measured. "It looks like restricted access," I said. She stopped a few feet away from me, breathing harder than before. "You think this is funny?" she asked. I shook my head. "No. I think it's necessary." She pointed toward the barriers like they had personally offended her. "You cannot block community access," she said. "That road serves every homeowner here." I nodded once. "It does," I agreed. "And it runs through private property." Her expression shifted. Not fully. Not yet. But the certainty started to crack. "That property is under association management," she said quickly. Too quickly. I let a small pause sit between us. Just long enough. "No," I said. "It isn't." Behind her, more residents started gathering near the top of the trail. Phones out. Voices rising. Questions stacking on top of each other. Nobody had expected to wake up to this. Nobody had planned for it. Rebecca stepped closer and lowered her voice. "If this is some kind of stunt," she said, "it is not going to end well for you." I met her eyes. "No rush," I said. "It already started." Her phone rang. Loud. Sharp. She glanced down at it and hesitated, then answered. "What?" she snapped. I could hear the voice on the other end faintly. Urgent. Talking fast. Words like violation. Access denial. Legal exposure. Insurance. Her face changed in real time. Color draining. Jaw tightening. "That is not possible," she said. Another pause. Listening. Processing. "No. We were not informed," she added. I turned slightly and looked back at the lake. Still calm. Still quiet. The surface didn't change. But everything connected to it had just shifted. Rebecca ended the call slowly. Lowered the phone. Looked at me like she was finally seeing something she had missed from the beginning. "What did you do?" she asked. I finished the last sip of my coffee and set the cup down on the railing beside me. "Nothing sudden," I said. "Just enforced what was already there." The voices behind her were louder now. Frustration building. Plans disrupted. Schedules breaking. And this was only the first morning. Only the first move. She thought she had 72 hours to remove me. What she actually triggered was something much bigger. Something that does not stop once it starts. Something tied to every driveway. Every dock. Every dollar invested in that view behind her. By noon, the calm was gone. The empty parking lot was not just an inconvenience anymore. It was a problem spreading in real time. I could hear it before I saw it. Raised voices echoing across the water. Car engines idling near the main road. People stopping where the barriers cut off access. Confusion turning into frustration. Frustration turning into something louder. I stayed on my porch and watched it unfold from a distance. That was the thing about systems. When you interrupt one small part, everything connected to it starts to shift. Deliveries were the first to fail. A box truck sat angled near the entrance. Driver outside. Phone pressed to his ear, pointing at the signage like it might change something. Then came the service vehicles. Landscaping crews. Maintenance vans. All backed up along the dirt road with nowhere to go. Schedules slipping. Contracts breaking minute by minute. I picked up my phone and opened the document Callahan had sent over. Official notice of restricted access enforcement. Time-stamped. Filed. Logged with the county before sunrise. Clean. Legal. Unavoidable. Every step documented exactly the way it needed to be. My phone buzzed again. This time it was not a private number. It was Rebecca. I let it ring once. Twice. Then answered. You need to remove those barriers immediately. No greeting. No control left in her voice. I leaned back in my chair. That's not how this works, I said. This is illegal, she snapped. You are obstructing access to private residences. I glanced out at the road again. More cars now. A line forming. People getting out. Walking up. Reading the signs. Arguing with each other because there was no one else to argue with. No, I said calmly. I'm enforcing access limitations on private property. Silence. Then a sharper tone. We will have law enforcement out there within the hour. I nodded slightly. That's fine, I said. They already have copies of the filings. Another pause. Longer this time. I could almost hear the shift happening on her end. Not denial anymore. Calculation. Trying to find a way around something she hadn't planned for. What do you want? She asked finally. There it was. The first real question. Not a demand. Not an order. A question. I didn't answer right away. I let the noise from the road fill the space between us. Engines. Voices. A car horn somewhere in the distance. You gave me 72 hours, I said. I'm using them. She exhaled sharply. You're hurting the entire community over a personal dispute. I looked back at the lake. Still calm. Still untouched by the chaos behind it. No, I said. I'm revealing how fragile your system is. Another call came through on her end. I could hear it interrupting. She ignored it. This will cost you, she said. More than you think. I almost smiled. You should look at your own numbers, I replied. Every hour that road stays closed, you lose more than I do. I could hear her breathing now. Fast. Controlled. Trying to keep up with something moving faster than she expected. We can resolve this, she said. The tone changed again. Softer. Strategic. Then start by acknowledging what you tried to do, I said. Silence again. Not empty this time. Heavy. Full of everything she did not want to say. Behind her, I could hear someone shouting her name. Another voice talking about legal exposure. Insurance claims. Emergency access concerns. The kind of words that turn into real money very quickly. This is not over, she said quietly. No, I agreed. It's just getting started. I ended the call before she could respond. Outside, the line of vehicles had doubled. The road was no longer just blocked. It was becoming a choke point. A bottleneck that every single homeowner now had to deal with. And the longer it stayed that way, the more expensive it became. Not for me. For them. Every hour stacking on top of the next. Quietly building into something much bigger than an eviction notice ever was. By late afternoon, the situation had outgrown inconvenience and turned into exposure. The kind that spreads quietly at first, then all at once. The road was no longer just backed up. It was stalled completely. Vehicles lined both sides for nearly half a mile. Engines off now. People standing in clusters instead of sitting behind wheels. Phones out. Voices raised. Not angry at me. Not yet. They were looking at each other. At the HOA. At Rebecca. trying to understand how something this basic could fail. I stayed inside most of the afternoon, but I could hear everything through the open windows. Every raised voice carried across the water like it was amplified. Around 3 o'clock, the next layer hit. Emergency services. Not an emergency. Just a routine call from what I could tell. But routine does not stay routine when access is compromised. A county vehicle pulled up near the barrier. Lights not flashing. Just present. Official. 2 officers stepped out. Calm. Professional. They read the signage. Checked the posted documents. Took pictures. One of them made a call. Short. Direct. Then they stepped back and didn't touch the barriers. That was the moment everything shifted again. Because now it was not just inconvenience. It was confirmation. Legal. Documented. Recognized. I stepped out onto the porch again as Rebecca approached them. Her posture was different now. Less control. More urgency. I couldn't hear every word, but I didn't need to. I saw the gestures. The pointing toward the houses. The explanation that sounded more like a defense than a statement. One of the officers shook his head slightly. Not dismissive. Just firm. The kind of response that means there is nothing to argue about. A few minutes later, Rebecca turned and looked straight at my cabin. No sunglasses this time. No mask left. Just frustration mixed with something deeper. Realization. She started walking toward me again. Slower than before. Measured. Careful now. Like she was stepping into something she finally understood had weight. I stayed where I was. Let her come to me. You're creating a liability situation, she said as soon as she reached the porch. Her voice was controlled again, but it took effort now. Emergency access is being compromised. That exposes everyone here. I nodded once. Yes, I said. It does. She blinked, caught off guard by the agreement. Then remove the barriers, she said quickly. We can address ownership disputes through proper channels. I leaned against the railing and looked past her toward the road. The line of vehicles had not moved. It had grown. This is the proper channel, I said. Enforcement of existing property rights. Her jaw tightened. You are escalating this, she said. I shook my head slowly. No, I replied. You did that when you filed that notice on my door. The words landed harder than anything else I had said so far. Because they were simple. Direct. True. Behind her, more residents had gathered closer now. Not just watching. Listening. Pieces connecting in real time. You could have talked to us, she said. It sounded almost reasonable. Almost. I held her gaze. You did not talk to me, I said. Silence again. This time not empty. Full. Heavy. The kind that pulls attention from everyone nearby. She looked back toward the road. Toward the barriers. Toward the officers who were still standing there, not interfering, just observing. Then back at me. What is it going to take? She asked. No edge this time. Just the question. I let a few seconds pass. Let the weight of everything around us settle into that moment. Recognition, I said. Correction. I paused. And compensation. Her expression hardened slightly at the last part. Not anger. Calculation again. Numbers starting to form in her head. Legal fees. Claims. Losses stacking by the hour. You're asking for a lot, she said. I almost smiled. You're already paying more, I replied. The wind picked up slightly across the lake. Ripples formed on the surface. Subtle. But enough to change the reflection. That was the thing about this place. It always looked calm from a distance, even when everything underneath it was shifting. By early evening, the numbers started showing up before the solutions did. That was always the turning point. Not the noise. Not the arguments. The numbers. I was back inside when the first official email came through. Not from Rebecca. From the HOA financial office. Subject line marked urgent. Language stripped of attitude. Straight to impact. Estimated losses per hour. Contract penalties. Service interruptions. Liability exposure. I read it once. Then again, slower. Every line confirmed what I already knew. This was no longer about access. It was about cost accumulation. The kind that compounds faster than people expect. My phone buzzed almost immediately after. Another call from Rebecca. I answered this time before the second ring. We need to meet. No introduction. No delay. I glanced out the window. The road was still blocked. But the energy had changed. People were not just frustrated anymore. They were organizing. Groups forming. Questions getting sharper. Directed. You're already here, I said. She didn't respond to that. Not like this, she replied. Inside. Private. I looked at the table. The documents were still spread out exactly where I had left them. Old maps. Survey lines. Signatures that carried more weight now than they ever had before. Give me 10 minutes, I said. When I stepped outside again, she was waiting near the porch. Alone this time. No audience. No performance. Just calculation. We walked inside without another word. I closed the door behind us. The cabin felt smaller with her in it. Not physically. Just heavier. She took in the room quickly. The papers. The folders. The kind of details people only notice when they realize they should have looked sooner. You've been sitting on this the whole time, she said. Not a question. I didn't answer right away. I moved to the table and turned one of the documents toward her. Property map. Clear lines. Clear ownership. She stepped closer and looked down. Her eyes moved fast at first. Then slower. Then stopped. This cannot be right, she said quietly. I leaned against the table. It's filed with the county, I said. Recorded. Verified. Unchallenged. She straightened slightly. Why was this never disclosed to the association? I almost laughed. Not out loud. Just enough to feel it. Because nobody asked the right question, I said. Silence filled the room again. Not tense this time. Heavy with understanding. She looked back at the map. Then at the stack of additional documents beside it. The lake access. The parking lot. The road, she said slowly. All of it ties back to this parcel. I nodded once. And that parcel ties back to me. That was the moment the balance shifted completely. Not dramatic. Not loud. Just final. She exhaled slowly and stepped back. Do you have any idea what this does to property valuations? She asked. I met her gaze. Yes, I said. That's why it matters. Her phone buzzed again. She ignored it this time. Focus locked on the table in front of her. If this stays restricted, she continued, you're not just hurting the HOA. You're destabilizing the entire development. I let that sit for a second. Then answered plainly. I'm correcting a structure that was built on assumptions. She closed her eyes briefly. Not out of frustration. Out of calculation. Running numbers. Outcomes. Scenarios. What do you want it to look like when this is resolved? She asked. There it was again. The real question. Not about control anymore. About survival. I stepped closer to the table and placed my hand on the map. Acknowledgement in writing. I said. Immediate withdrawal of the eviction. I paused. And a revised access agreement. On my terms. She opened her eyes and looked at me. Really looked this time. Not at the cabin. Not at the situation. At me. You planned this, she said. I shook my head slowly. No, I replied. I prepared for it. Outside, the noise continued. Cars still lined the road. People still waiting for answers. But inside that room, everything had already shifted. The question was no longer whether I would leave. It was how much it would cost them to make things right. By the time Rebecca left the cabin, the tone outside had already shifted from frustration to urgency. People were no longer asking when the road would open. They were asking how much this was going to cost them. I stepped out onto the porch and watched as small groups formed near the blocked entrance. Phones were out. Voices were lower now. Controlled. Focused. The kind of conversations that happen when people realize the problem is bigger than they thought. Within the hour, the HOA board members started arriving one by one. Not in a coordinated way. Just pulled in by the same pressure. I recognized a few from past meetings. Different energy now. No authority in their posture. Just concern. Rebecca stood near the center of it all, speaking quietly with two of them. She looked up when she saw me. Not confrontational. Not defensive. Just direct. She walked over without hesitation. "They've seen the documents," she said. I nodded. "And?" I asked. She took a breath before answering. "They're asking what it takes to stabilize the situation immediately." That word again. Stabilize. It meant they had already accepted the shift. They just needed a way to contain it. "That depends on how fast they're willing to move," I replied. She glanced back at the group then. Leaned in slightly. "There's already talk of emergency assessments," she said. "Special fees. Legal retainers. Contingency funds." I let that sit for a moment. "Those numbers will not stay small," I said. She nodded once. "We know." Behind her, one of the board members raised his voice slightly. Not angry. Just strained. "We cannot keep the access restricted overnight," he said to the others. "This affects deliveries, services, insurance coverage." Another voice responded. "We don't even know if we have the authority to override this." That was the part they were just beginning to understand. Authority had limits. Ownership did not. Rebecca turned back to me. "They want to meet now," she said. "All of us." I looked past her at the group. Then back at her. "Here," I said. Minutes later, they were inside the cabin. 4 board members. Rebecca. And me. The space felt tighter now. Not because of the number of people. Because of what was at stake. I laid the documents out again. This time slower. Walking them through each piece. Parcel boundaries. Recorded easements. Transfer history. Every detail mattered now. No interruptions. No arguments. Just quiet absorption. When I finished, one of them finally spoke. "If this stands as presented, the association does not control any of the primary access points," he said. I met his gaze. "That is correct," I replied. Another board member shook his head slowly. "Then every property here is technically dependent on a private agreement we do not own." I nodded once. "Yes." Silence followed. Heavy. Calculating. One of them pulled out a notepad and started writing numbers. "If access is disrupted for 48 hours, we're looking at breach clauses across multiple service contracts," he said. "That alone could exceed $200,000. Another added. "And property values will start dropping immediately if this becomes public." Rebecca stepped in then. "Which is why we need resolution today," she said firmly. All eyes turned to me. Not as an opponent anymore. As the only path forward. "You said you wanted acknowledgement in writing," one board member said. "That is manageable." I did not respond. He continued. "Withdrawal of the eviction notice. Also manageable." He hesitated before the next part. "But the revised access agreement. We need to understand the scale." I leaned forward slightly. "The scale matches the risk you created," I said. "You attempted to remove legal access to property I own. Without verification. Without due process." They did not argue. They could not. "So the correction reflects that exposure," I continued. Rebecca spoke quietly. What are the terms? I placed a new document on the table. One they had not seen yet. Prepared long before today. Exclusive control remains with me, I said. The association receives licensed access. Annual fee. Indexed to property value. One of them inhaled sharply. I continued. Maintenance costs shift to the association. Liability coverage adjusted to reflect usage. I paused. And any future enforcement action against my property requires third-party review. The room went completely still. They understood immediately. This was not a negotiation for convenience. It was a structural reset. One of the board members leaned back slowly. This will cost the association millions over time, he said. I nodded once. Yes. But it will cost more if you do not agree, I added. Outside, the light was fading. Inside, the decision was already forming. Not because they wanted it. Because they had no alternative. The small decision they made this morning had grown into something much larger. And now, they were the ones trying to contain the fallout. The decision did not take as long as they expected it would. It never does when the numbers are clear. Within 30 minutes, the tone inside the cabin shifted from resistance to alignment. Not agreement. Not comfort. Alignment with reality. One of the board members made the call first. Not to argue. To verify funding capacity. Another opened his laptop and started drafting language. Rebecca stood near the table, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the documents like she was memorizing every line. We'll need a formal vote, one of them said. You'll have it, another replied immediately. Tonight if necessary. I did not interrupt. There was nothing left to push. They were already moving in the only direction available. By the time the first draft of the agreement was printed, the outside noise had quieted down. Not because the situation was resolved. Because word had started to spread. People understood something had changed. They just didn't know the details yet. Rebecca took the document and read through it slowly. Line by line. No rush now. Every clause mattered. We're including the acknowledgement exactly as requested, she said. I nodded. She continued reading. Eviction withdrawal. Immediate and unconditional. Another pause. Then the part that carried the most weight. Licensed access under revised terms. Her voice lowered slightly as she read the numbers. Even she felt it. When she finished, she set the paper down carefully. This will pass, she said quietly. Not a guess. A conclusion. One of the board members looked at me directly. Once this is signed, access is restored immediately, he said. I met his gaze. Yes, I replied. And remain stable as long as the agreement is honored. He nodded once. That was enough. They stepped outside to finalize the vote. I stayed inside. Not out of distance. Out of certainty. 10 minutes later, they came back in. No speeches. No ceremony. Just a folder placed on the table. Signed. Dated. Official. Rebecca remained standing. It is done, she said. I looked at the signatures. Every board member accounted for. No gaps. No hesitation marks. Clean execution. I picked up the pen and added my name. One final line completing the shift. The moment the ink settled, everything changed. Not visibly. Not loudly. Structurally. Permanently. I closed the folder and set it aside. Access is restored, I said. Outside, the first car engine started within seconds. Then another. Movement returning. Flow re-established. But the cost of that movement was now embedded into every property around us. Rebecca let out a slow breath. Not relief. Release of pressure. This didn't have to happen, she said. I looked at her. No, I agreed. It didn't. She gave a small nod. Accepting it. Not arguing it. One of the board members spoke from behind her. We'll need to communicate this carefully, he said. People are going to ask questions. I picked up the folder again and handed it to him. Then answer them with facts, I said. Ownership didn't change today. Understanding did. He took the folder with both hands, like it carried weight beyond paper. Because it did. Rebecca walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back. You never intended to leave, she said. I shook my head once. No, I replied. I intended to be left alone. She held my gaze for a second longer, then nodded and stepped outside. The cabin felt quiet again after they were gone. The same as it had been before all of this started. But nothing about the situation was the same. The lake was still there. Calm. Unchanged. The road was open again. The parking lot full. Everything looked normal from the outside. But underneath, the entire structure had shifted. Millions of dollars in future obligations. Legal frameworks rewritten. Authority redistributed. All triggered by a single decision that should have never been made. I stepped out onto the porch one last time that evening and watched the last of the cars move through without obstruction. No barriers. No arguments. Just quiet compliance with a reality they now fully understood. Small causes do not always stay small. And when they collide with the wrong kind of ownership, the consequences do not scale gently. They multiply. And once they do, there is no going back to the way things were before.